Hey there, lovely listeners. Welcome to Uniquely Wired Podcast. I'm your host, Nani. On this podcast, we uncover the beauty and nature of autism through heartfelt conversations. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the last episode of Uniquely Wired Podcast. I'm your host, Nani, and I am so excited to have you here and that you guys have been here with me since season 2 started, and maybe you've been here since season 1, and I'm just grateful for each and every one of you. And so to end this wonderful season, I have a very, very special guest reporting live from Alabama. I am so happy to have Julie Carter with us, you guys. She is an attorney and she is a mother. I am just excited for her to share with us a little bit about herself.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to
Yes.
be here. And yep, I'm Julie. I'm a lawyer and I practice in Alabama. I neurodivergent adult, late diagnosed, and I have 2 kids. That is how I came into special education law. Used to do real estate law. So now I do this, and I love every minute of it, working with other families. So what else can I tell you about myself? I'm also a speaker, a consultant, and a certified parenting coach. I work with organizations to implement neurodiversity affirming and trauma informed strategies. Pretty much anything I can do to help my mission, which is to help kids feel safe and seen and understood at home and at school.
I love that. I love that so much. And how old are your children, Julie?
They're now 11 and 12.
Oh wow. You had them back to back.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's awesome. Okay, so I heard that you were in real estate
Yes,
and
used to be.
now you're an attorney. Like, wow. So what made you do that whole change? That is a huge difference.
Well, I was doing real estate law at a huge law firm, mostly like real estate, banking, that kind of thing. And
Oh,
then I
okay.
became a parent, and then I had an IEP meeting, and I thought, whoa, this is difficult for me, and I'm a lawyer. I'm, going to go down this ADHD rabbit hole, learn every single thing I can about this, and now do it for a living. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
I did.
Wow, that is inspiring. The fact that, that brought you to where you're at now. So thank you so much for sharing that. So let's get right into the questions. My first question for you would be, what legal rights do parents of autistic children have regarding education, healthcare, or other services? And obviously your focus is, with special education. So what would you say those rights are? Because of course we have families that are listening that just recently received a diagnosis, or perhaps have been in this walk for a few years, like myself. My daughter is 7 and she's been diagnosed since she was 2. So almost 6 years I've been in this, and my son is also autistic. But I feel like, yes, I know my rights, but at the same time, there are still some things that I would like to learn. Because it could be intimidating. And like you said, you were in the IEP meeting, and it's like, whoa, shocker, because it's so much information that's thrown at parents, right? Um, so what would you say those rights are? And we could keep it as basic as possible so it's understanding for the families that are listening.
Sure. Well, first, I have to lawyer disclaimer. So nothing that I'm going to say here is actual legal advice. But if you do need a lawyer, for goodness sake, get one earlier rather than later. You can find a lawyer if you go to COPA, COPAA.org. That's the Council of Parent Advocates and Attorneys. It's a nonprofit. They have a directory there with attorneys in each state. Or you can go to your state's nonprofit disability rights organization. If you go to ndrn.org, you can find your state's nonprofit organization and go there. They'll have resources for you there as well. So if you need a lawyer, get you one. That's my first thing.
Mm-hmm.
It can always be helpful, even just a consultation. If you feel lost and if you feel, gaslighted, confused, if they're throwing acronyms at you and going, no, it's fine, I swear. And you're like, but what? It's okay to call an advocate, call an attorney. Just because you call one doesn't mean you have to hire them and sue everybody. So
Right.
keep that in
Mm-hmm.
mind.
Mm-hmm.
So with the legal rights, we'll start with education. So there are three laws, I guess, that would apply mostly: the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, right? The ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, I think. So everybody mostly has heard of IDEA. That's where the IEPs come from, and 504. 504 comes from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the difference between the two is there's a lot of differences, but to get an IEP, there has to be a need for specialized instruction. That doesn't apply under 504. If you have a disability under 504, you should be able to get a 504 plan that provides you accommodations. The idea there is to level the playing field. That's the saying, to level the playing field. So if someone has, ADHD and they need to get up and move, or if they're autistic and they need, headphones or time like breaks or whatever it is that they need, that can fall under 504. Now, if you need specialized instruction, that's going to bring in the IDEA and IEP world. And there's lots of rights under that. I guess some things to point out would be you have a right to request an evaluation of your child. If you believe your child should have an IEP and they don't, just request one, put it in writing, and request it in writing to the special education director, the principal, I put all the people. And then you're going to ask that they do an evaluation in all areas of suspected disability. Okay, so just because your child's autistic doesn't mean they might not qualify in another area, because IDEA has 13 different eligibility categories. So, maybe they have an autism medical diagnosis that is not the same thing as eligibility under an IEP. So it needs to be an educational need for it to fall under IDEA. So lots of times you'll end up with medical diagnosis of autism level 1, or low support needs or something like that, which of course we know doesn't necessarily mean any of that. And you
Right.
end up with a 504 and you're like, but they come home and have meltdowns every day. Okay, that's when you also have the right to request what's called an IEE, an independent education evaluation. And you can have that done at the school's expense by an outside provider. The school is required to consider that, not required to say, yep, we love all of this, let's scoop it in and do everything this person said, but they are required to consider it. Then if there's still disagreement, then there are options for resolving that disagreement. There's a state complaint, which usually is used for like procedural issues, more like they have an IEP, they're supposed to be getting their hours, they're not getting their hours. Dear state, please fix this. Then there's due process, which is more like they have messed up in so many ways. My child has a right to a free, appropriate public education, and they are not getting it. So that is when due process would apply.
Wow.
So
That,
yeah.
that is amazing. Thank you so much for giving us all that information. Um Very familiar with a lot of what you just mentioned. I don't know if you follow my personal page out of my Instagram page, but in the beginning of the school year, I was having issues with my daughter's school, which I've talked about this before. Um, and so I had to get a lawyer involved for the first time in my life. Never thought I would, but the joys of special education. To be nice about it, right? And um, I had hired a special education advocate. And so I've known her for years, looked through my daughter's IEP, find out that she's only getting 30 minutes of speech a month, which is nothing. And so I had to get a lawyer. I heard of this lawyer. He was great. I mean, I've heard great things about this firm specifically, and reached out to him. His focus is pretty much, IEP, schools, K to 8 grades, and he was such a help. I mean, I'm forever grateful for him. Um, hello, one, okay, like my daughter's rates are valuable, and to me, it's
Mhm.
like sometimes the school can look at you, and I'm only speaking from experience, can look at you like you don't know what you're doing, or like, oh, she's not aware of law, or he's not aware of the law or their rights. And this is why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I feel like there are so many families that really don't know their rights. They don't
Mhm.
even know what to look for on an IEP to know their child is getting the right accommodations. And so I had
Yes.
to fight. And yes, I fought hard. And I think they knew, okay, she's not playing. We can't play with this mom. She knows what her rights are. She knows that she can get a lawyer. She can come into the school and do what she needs to do in order for her daughter to get what she needs to get. Um, it was hard. Those, what was it, September, October,
Mhm.
November, December. Those 3 months were tough. Lots of stress.
Absolutely.
I was overwhelmed. People would talk to me, but honestly, I wasn't fully in the conversation. My brain was really thinking about, I want my daughter to have that amount of therapy that she needs to be getting. Long
Mhm.
story short, she's no longer going to be in that public school next school year. She got into a charter school, which I've heard fantastic things about. And I love that they focus on life skills, which is huge for me as a mother. So I'm excited for her. I'm just glad I'm not going to have to deal with them anymore. I know it sounds mean, but I'm just saying, my experience has not been the greatest. And I know
Mhm.
that that's not everybody's position, but I know with the 504, like, I didn't know the difference between them. So I'm glad that I'm going to end up listening to the episode after, of course, to get a better clarification. But that was so good, Julie. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything to what I just said.
Um, Probably. Um, yeah, so some things you can get with a 504, some responses you can get are, well, you can't have any modifications under a 504. Well, that's not necessarily true. So, we bring our advocacy skills in and really try to work with the school to get them where we need them to be. Sometimes it doesn't work, and you hire a lawyer, and then sometimes it works. But when you're sitting there, I mean, one thing I like to think about when you're sitting at the IEP table and they're throwing things out at you, like words, and you feel like you don't know the law. Let me explain the law. And they say things like State Department, and you're like, is the Secretary of State coming in here? What are you talking about? Um, it's just silly sounding and very much reassurances. And you're like, I'm not reassured. All of these things. Um, I find it very useful to just acknowledge, like, you all are the educators, you are the experts in how to educate children. Thank you for being here, for caring about my child. I'm the expert in my child, right? I am the expert in my child. Thank you for being here this year. I'm going to be at all of the IEP meetings from today until all the way through the end of high school. I'm going to be the one that's in every single room, every single time. So I need to be heard, because this is today and this is this year. And you have tons of students, and I get that. This is my kid. I'm going to be here, only here with this kid the whole time. So when I tell you something about my child, I really need you to believe me.
That is so
That
good.
tends to be impactful. It tends to help because it is true. They are the experts in education, but they're not experts in the law. They're just not. They're not lawyers. Unless you called your lawyer and they brought their lawyer, there's no lawyer in the room. And if they reference the law, then say, okay, can you point me to where that law is? Do you have a copy? Do you have a copy of that policy? You can ask all of these things. Saying no or asking questions or taking longer than they want you to when it's kind of getting toward the end of the meeting, supposedly, it's not rude. They're not doing you any favors by cajoling and trying to push you out the door. And there's no need to do any favors by letting them. It's okay. You can still have a very congenial and professional relationship working well with these teachers while also sometimes disagreeing and asking questions. That's okay. You have a right to be at that IEP meeting. You have a right to be a full member of that IEP team.
Yep.
If you're not being treated like a full member of that IEP team, then they're not doing what they're required to do under the law.
Mm. Girl, I'm like, preach, preach, preach. I love that. I love it. I love it so much. And I watch a lot of don't laugh at me. My husband and I watch a lot of Judge Judy and Tribunal Justice. Like it's just so bad. We're obsessed. We watch every episode. But it's like she says, that's he, she said. Like, you can't just tell me, oh, this is what it says. No, show me. Show me. I need evidence. I need to physically see it. Like, I'm a visual person. So, like, you could just tell me all these things. It's going to go through one ear and come out the other. Not to mention my self-diagnosed ADHD brain. Yeah, that's another story within itself. So I need to make sure that what you're telling me, it's legal, it's right, it makes sense. And you're not just telling me these things for me to feel
Yeah.
good. Because at the end of the day, it's not about feeling good. We're going to feel uncomfortable sometimes in these meetings. And you know what? It's
Yeah.
okay. Sometimes uncomfortable, it's a good thing. You just got to make
Yes.
sure you're being told the right thing.
My
IEP
recommendation
meetings.
is always
Go ahead.
okay, I'll do it. My recommendation is always if it's getting uncomfortable and you threw out something that's making people uncomfortable, just sit in the silence. Just let it be quiet in there because somebody's going to come along and fill it in with something that's probably going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Don't feel like you have to fill in all of the gaps. It gets uncomfortable and you start talking on top of it. Just say, I don't agree with that. Can you tell me more? And then just
Right.
be quiet and wait until someone.
That is so good. Yeah, no, I agree. And I remember when I was in the process with the lawyer, he would tell me, he's like, you know what? It's okay. You can bring it forward, bring the question forward. They don't have an answer. It's okay. We're gonna get that answer. We're gonna get to the bottom of it. But it's all about making sure that you get those questions answered. Don't feel like, oh, you have to keep it to yourself. No, express yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question, which I believe we've covered some of it, can parents request accommodations or modifications in educational settings to support their child's needs under the IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act? So I believe you said they can, right? I believe you touched on that a little bit.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, you can ask for the moon. They don't necessarily have to give you the moon. They're not required to provide the best education possible. They are required to provide a free, appropriate public education. That's what they're required to provide. It's not the best one ever. So I don't recommend going in and saying, well, but what's best for my child, the best education, because that's not the legal standard. That's not what they're required to give, right? You need the best thing to do if you want to go in there and you know that your child needs something is have some data, have a reason, even if it's not necessarily your child specific. If they're taking away recess from your child and then they're having a meltdown every afternoon because they've got no free play, then gather up research, documents, send it ahead to the team. These are all of the organizations that show, and all of the data and all the research that shows that kids need recess. Here's every single day that my kid has had a meltdown after they did not get recess. Here's all of my data. Show me your contradictory data that supports you continuing to not allow my kid to go to recess. You need to have reasons and data to show up with that are real. And when you do that, if they don't have data to say something in response, you've got a pretty strong argument there that they need to do what you're asking for.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, I'm loving this. I feel like I don't even have to add to what you're already saying because it's just perfect. I don't want to mess it up. Anyways, my next question is, what are the legal obligations of schools and other institutions in providing support and accommodations for autistic students?
Okay. Let's see. So we've covered some of it. The school has to
Right.
give parents adequate notice of an IEP meeting. They have to allow the parent to participate. Now, that doesn't mean they just have to wait around for a parent forever. They have to give it three good solid tries and document that they've done so. But they do have to really put an effort in to include the parent in the IEP meeting. They can't just send you an email that says, "Oh, we had an IEP meeting and now your kid, something." No, absolutely not. They cannot do that. They have to include the parent. They have to, under FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, they have to provide parents copies of their child's educational records if the parent requests them. So you can get copies of all of your kids' educational records if that's what you want. Send them a request, say FERPA, and they should be getting you those documents. FERPA is also a privacy law, so they have an obligation not to breach that privacy. They can't, share your child's information outside of that IEP room, really, and to all the people that need to know within the building. But they can't just call your kid's doctor and ask them questions and that sort of thing. They can't do that. It's confidential records, and they have to keep those confidential. They can't retaliate against parents for advocating for their child. Sometimes you'll see parents who are zealous advocates, and then they get like a call to child protective services for no reason at all. That's retaliation. They can't do that. Or if they, you have a child who's dealing with school refusal and school anxiety, and they're not able to make it to school every day, and then you get a truancy violation notice in the mail. Come on, that's not a truancy violation. Like, sure, let's talk about this. That happens quite a bit, but that's just a sign that we do need more help here. This kid cannot go to school. And again, have your data. If that's what's going on, if you have the means, take your kid to a therapist, get somebody who has talked to schools before, ideally, because you may need that person to be an expert at a due process hearing at some point. If you can't find somebody like that, fine, just get anybody who will write a note that says, "I am treating this child for anxiety. They are having a hard time going to school. Thank you, Dr. Me." That's fine. Just do whatever you can to get something to support you and your position and your child. If you have anything other than just you going, "Please, though, I promise," then that can be helpful. So even if it's, have a notebook. In that notebook, you're going to write down every conversation that you have with the school. In that notebook, you're going to keep a log of every afternoon when your child comes home and has a meltdown. You're going to keep a log of how long it takes to do that homework, how much help you had to give them. On the piece of homework, you're going to write, "Had help from parent the entire time, took 4 hours," and you're going to send it back to the school. Then you're going to call the school and you're going to say, "Hey, is this supposed to take 4 hours? How long is this homework supposed to take, really?" And if they say 30 minutes, then you do 30 minutes worth, however much that is, and you say, "Did 30 minutes worth. It's only 2 problems. I was there. Signed to me." And you take a picture of it and you send it back to the school. That is all data to support what you may be asking for next time in the next meeting. And they need to consider it. I mean, whenever they're putting together an IEP, part of it is the present levels of performance, right? The PLAF. That's a huge part of the IEP. They have to consider current data. If you've got data, that's very helpful. That's part of the present levels of how your child is doing at that time. Present levels should drive the goals, and the goals should drive the services. So
Mm,
when you go through the IEP, you should have parent concerns. Then you should have like present levels of academic performance. You should have, what the most recent evaluations are, and then the present levels of academic performance. The goals should be based on where your child is at that time. That's the present levels section. And then whatever services are provided, those should be based on the goals. The services should be created so that they help the child reach those goals. And the goals should be appropriate for what the child actually needs, right? Plus, whatever accommodations will help them get there. So that's
mm.
sort of, when you look through the IEP, that's how it should be structured.
Wow. That was so good. That's like a
I hope
lot
I
of
answered your
information,
question.
but good. No, yes, you did. Like, it's a lot of information, but good information that as parents and families that are listening should be aware of these things. Excuse me. When you mentioned the whole thing with truancy, oh my gosh, like I'm sure that's a very common one for a lot of families, especially maybe some of those that their children have a very, very hard time regulating. Nothing helps them but
Hmm.
staying in their rooms. And so they might be missing more than the, the required time in school. And then all of a sudden, this family has to deal with law and, having to get an attorney and do all this extra stuff because the school that your child goes to is not being understanding, even though you're bringing that data, even though you're bringing that evidence that, listen, it, literally, my child is having a hard time. You think I want to miss work? You
Hmm.
think I want to have my child at home every single time? Because listen, we need a break as parents.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
And
Um, mhm,
since you mentioned work, I wanted to say, you said and or other organizations. Um, if you work for a company or business that falls under the FMLA requirements, Family
yeah.
Medical Leave Act,
Mhm.
um, you should be able to get FMLA leave for going to IEP meetings. FMLA doesn't
Oh,
have to be just 6 months at a time or 4 months or 3 months or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be one huge chunk of time. It can be intermittent leave. So you can have leave for an IEP meeting. You can have leave. I used to have 4 hours of leave once a week every Thursday to take my child to therapy for I don't even remember how long.
really?
So that is something to think about if you're having a hard time with your work and trying to take care of your kid
Hmm.
and make it all happen. Now, a lot of the time it's unpaid work. I mean, it's unpaid leave, but at least, you know, it's
You're being
leave
present.
that you're allowed.
Yeah, and it's not like accumulating, you getting
Right.
suspended or something. Yeah, my
Hmm.
husband gets FMLA, but usually for like sick days and stuff like that for the kids or if there's an
Yes.
appointment. But that's good. I didn't even think about the IP meeting because I feel like now that she's going to a new school, I would love for him to experience, he doesn't really go to the
Hmm.
IP meetings because of course he's been at work and I've been the one. But now that she's going to a new school, when she has that IEP meeting there, I would love for him to attend and just get that experience, right? Because you never know. I may be here today, but we don't know what tomorrow would happen, right? Because it's not promised.
Hmm.
That's just how it is. This is life. This is reality.
Yeah.
And we don't like to talk about these things. But you guys, it is crucial that you have a plan for your child. And I feel like that's something that I want to bring for season 3. I want to bring someone that, like a financial person that talks about like wills and things like that when it comes to like a passing of the family and who's going to be in charge of your special needs child. Because I mean, you're a neurodivergent mom, like, you know these are worries that we have. And I just had this conversation with my mother-in-law yesterday, how sometimes as a Latina, as a Hispanic, like, we don't like to talk about these things, and I'm pretty sure a lot of cultures don't, when it comes to like, okay, who's going to take care of my child? when I'm not here?
Hmm.
It's a deep
Yeah.
conversation to have, but it is an important one. I refuse. Listen, something happens to me, God forbid, tomorrow, I'm in the hospital. Okay, they're giving me weeks of living, and I'm here lost because I don't know
Hmm.
what's going to happen,
Yes.
you
Hmm.
know? Um, and I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot, and I really feel like it's something that I'm supposed to be working on and should be
Hmm.
in the works of planning. Life is short, you know, you just never know what could happen. And so even though my kids are still so young, I would only have my in-laws and my parents,
Hmm.
whom I trust anyways, out of many people that I
Yeah.
know or I'm friends with.
Right. You're
It's a
looking
different
at the
type of level of trust, you know?
hmm someone
So
who
thank
really
you for
knows.
bringing
Yeah.
that up. Yeah, I think I appreciate you bringing that up about the FMLA because it's something I can talk about my husband with um today.
Hmm.
Um okay, let's do the last question, and that is, how does the legal landscape vary between states regarding the rights and protections afforded to autistic individuals and their families?
So the IDEA and all of the federal laws are blanket laws that apply to all states, right? But then states can do more than those basic requirements. And then there are some parts of the IDEA that leave certain things up to states. So some states, in some states, an advocate can represent a parent at a due process hearing. Some states not. Now, under IDEA, there's also a fee shifting provision so that if it's attorney's fees and the parent prevails on, you know, part of the argument that matters, you know, then the school district can be responsible for paying the attorney's fees for the parents. That doesn't count if it's for an advocate, but still, an advocate can sometimes represent, in some states, represent parents in due process hearings. Um, in some states, just the way things work are a little bit different. Like in some states, it is well known that you are not going to win a due process. You're gonna go, you're gonna lose, and then you're gonna have to file in district court. In some states, that's just how it goes. Some states not, but some states yes. Um, some states afford more rights than others. So California, um, under the 13 different eligibility categories, one of them is OHI. That's other health impairment. That's usually what ADHD will fall under. Um, and then, you know, there's diabetes, all kinds of things can fall up under OHI. But they specifically added under California law FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which is huge because it can be quite difficult to advocate for students with FASD. And having that as a specifically listed thing under OHI was quite well done, California. I was glad to see it. And then um, restraint and seclusion, there's different laws in different states for that. I always recommend if you have an outside provider and you have a kid who's autistic, have if you have an IEP evaluation done, have an OT, occupational therapy evaluation done, have a sensory profile done. If you can say, like, my child is very touch aversive, that's a good reason to have them really be thoughtful before they start using restraint on your child. Because seclusion and restraint are trauma. They just are. And having some reason to point to can be more persuasive than just, no, please don't, you know, because they don't care. But those laws do vary by state, and there's not a federal law currently. The
Okay.
Keeping All Students Safe Act has been out there for a while. It's still sitting around in Congress. Call your congressperson, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
so recess, different. There are some states that will not allow teachers to take away recess as punishment. There are some states that require a certain amount of recess for certain
Mm.
levels, usually elementary school. So, and then the timelines for under IDEA, some of them can vary by state. For like, how long do they have to evaluate? How long do they have to make a decision? How long do they have that sort of thing? So
Mm-hmm.
different states have different timelines. And that's about it. That's all the ones I made a list of. So
Yeah.
that's about
No,
it.
that is great, Julie. I think everything you shared, on this last episode of season 2 was very, very insightful and valuable. I know to me it was, and I learned some things that I was not aware of. So I do appreciate you bringing this to the podcast and for your guests, and, just continuing to bring awareness to the families. Really, that's what this podcast has been about since the beginning, making sure the families don't feel alone, they feel seen, and that, listen, you have a right. Just because you may not have a degree or a diploma, even, does not mean that you are not qualified for your child, or
Yeah.
perhaps
You
to
have a
advocate
degree in
for your
your
child.
baby.
Exactly. You have a degree in motherhood for your child.
Hmm.
That's it. We're going to
Yes.
call it
Advanced.
motherhood degree.
Yes.
The motherhood
Yes.
degree. Because, like Julie said, yes, my child, right? From a school perspective and from a academic perspective, but I know my child at home. I birthed my child. Listen, I know when my child has been sad, has been upset, has cried. I know when I pick up my kids from school what to look for, what to see. The
Hmm.
motherhood discernment, I'm telling you, that God has blessed us with, it's on another level. Because can nobody tell you that no, that's not, no. And there's one thing where, yes, some parents do take advantage and sometimes they do lie. I used to work out of school and I know how it can be. However, be real. I know my mom will always say, I know when my child is wrong and I know when my child is right. My mom would know when we were lying.
Hmm.
Don't play with her, because she knew from a mile away that you were lying. And that's one thing we don't want to do. We want to make sure that we are speaking truth about our children, that what's right for them, and that wherever they go to school, they are being provided those accommodations. And I think, Julie, the reason why I was so persistent in making sure my daughter was receiving what she needed, um, it's not just because obviously I want her to have those accommodations, but also because now she's going to go to a new school, right? The school is going to go based on her IEP. And if that IEP was messed up and a hot mess, and they notice that I just left it like that, then guess what?
Hmm.
It's going to be a terrible experience, like from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I had
Yes.
to make sure, and it's something that the lawyer advised me. He said, if you're planning to
Hmm.
put her in a different school, you want to make sure that you're getting this solved now.
Hmm.
And it's not easy. It wasn't easy. It was a lot of headaches, a lot of thinking. I mean, my brain was fried
Hmm.
by the time I was done with all of this chaos, right? Because it was a lot. It was a lot. And I know for some people might be like, well, you had to do what you had to do. Yes, but we have to understand that it takes a mental toll on the parent as well. You know,
Absolutely.
um, it brought a lot of anxiety to me. And so now I feel at peace that I know, not to mention she has a device, a communication device. They were not taking that device with her to like her lunch, recess.
Mm.
I don't care if she's running and she's not paying attention to it. At some point, she's going to want something while she's out there running during recess. Let's just say potty, or I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe she falls or something and she's hurt. That should
Yeah.
be accessible to her at all times. And that's to all the parents that are listening. If your child has a device, it should be with them at all times. And y'all could go back a few episodes. I forget which episode it was. I had my son's speech therapist and she spoke about this. It is important. And
Yes.
Julie can
Do
tell
not
you,
let
as an
them.
attorney herself and as a neurodivergent mom herself, like, that's by law. Your children should have their device. That should, the school shouldn't just say, oh, it's too heavy or they don't want to carry it around. That's not an excuse.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
They should never have to earn their accommodations ever. We don't have kids earning breaks. No. If they need a break, they get a break. No earning breaks. That's nonsense. And if they have a communication device, then when they take that communication device away from them, they're taking their ability to communicate. They're taking their right to communicate away from them. That is unacceptable. You're silencing that
Mhm.
child. You can't do that. How could they speak up
Exactly.
if something was wrong? They couldn't.
That's what I'm saying. And I feel like I remember being in the IEP meeting and I was like, ah, I would say I was angry. I was angry. I was upset because I'm very passionate about my children and their rights and just their accommodations. And
Mhm,
for them to tell me, well, you know, like, yeah, we don't take it here because really it's just a quick walk or whatever the case may be. It baffled me. Like I look at them, I'm like,
mhm,
really? And that's when I remember I bawled down crying. And I said, you know what? And I've learned the crying is not a sign of weakness. I just want families to know this. It is not a sign of weakness. You're crying because, you know what? You really love your child and you want them to have the best possible, right? And like Julie said, we may not always get the best of the best, but as long as they're getting what they're supposed to be having based on that IEP,
mhm.
then you should be good.
Yes.
um, so I told them, I
That
said,
IEP.
you guys have to understand, like, I was like, you have to understand that my daughter may never speak with her verbal
Mhm,
words. And so if you are not taking out of your time to teach my daughter or motivate her to use her device to communicate, how will she ever develop a passion for it if there's no consistency?
mhm.
And they looked at me and they were
Absolutely.
sorry, they were sorry. Um, and I took their apology. I forgave them. I said, you know what? We all make mistakes, and I can't stand here and act like I'm perfect because I'm not. I'm constantly making mistakes, and the point is to learn from them. I don't want to have to be back in here for the same thing when we've already had a conversation, right?
Mhm,
So I think, advocating is key for your child, but you have to know your rights. You have to know, the law. You have to know your child's IEP in order to go in there and fight the way you're supposed to fight for your child.
mhm. Always keep it respectful if you can. Always keep it professional.
Absolutely.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
because at some point, if you end up in due process, something that a hearing officer may have to consider, may have to balance the equities, is what they call it. So if parents have been very unreasonable, then if they're asking for, a placement in a private school or a different school at the public school's expense, that can weigh against you. If they don't send all capital letter emails, like just put them in regular capitals, like just regular case emails.
Yeah.
Um, and if you have a hard time with not losing it in an IEP meeting, practice with somebody ahead of time. Lose it in practice with
Yes.
somebody ahead of time, and just
Yes.
totally lose it, and then go in there and keep it together and keep your cool. Crying, fine. Just
Yes.
say, I need a break right now. That's fine. I need to
Exactly.
feel these feelings for a second, so that I can think clearly. That's fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I
keep
think
it
that is very true.
respectful.
Keeping your control, self control is key as well. There's a difference between, being hostile and passionate. Like I'm
Mhm,
passionate. I'm never going to go into a meeting, cussing somebody out. First of all, it's not my style. I don't use that type of language. And so
mhm,
that's not the way I represent myself, but just the way I'm speaking with you now. And I tell people, like, listen, I'm not giving you an attitude. I'm just very passionate when it comes to these type of topics because
oh, yeah.
I care, I care. And I want to make sure that when I leave this earth, my children are somewhat safe and welcome in this society that could be
Mhm.
craziness. Um, but anyways, we have to end the episode. But before we end the episode, I did make a story on my Instagram and I have some questions for you. However, we're gonna pick one of those questions and
Okay.
hopefully you can answer this question. But this is from Rosie Awesome One. We're gonna answer your question. She says, my son is going to junior high school in September in New York. I was told I'm not allowed to choose school. I'm guessing that's what she wrote. Everything is like crumbled up together. So I don't know if she meant like she's not allowed to choose a school. And then she put true, question mark.
I'm not sure how zoning works, like school zoning in New York, if that's the question. Some places have lotteries and some places have specific placements. If he's been in a private placement at public expense before, and if that's already in his IEP, that's definitely something to get in touch with your local school district with ahead of time. The local school district should implement the IEP from the previous school district, at least until they can do their own evaluations and implement their own new IEP. So not sure exactly what she means about choosing school, but if there's school choice right or something like that in New York, then there's no reason that a child with, a disability shouldn't fall under that unless that's something that the law says. So you may want to contact your state's disability rights organization. So under ndrn.org, there's each one has, people there, lawyers, advocates who can answer questions. Give them a call and you can get some specific New York guidance, because I think New York is actually one of those states where they're fairly well known for you're going to lose and then you're going to end up in district court if you go to due process. It's fine. All the lawyers know. Just get a lawyer if you go to due process.
Yeah, I think so too. And you know what, Rosie? I did tag Julie on, on my stories. So please, make sure if you have any questions regarding those things, I'm sure she can help you out. Maybe you can, ask the question differently. But yeah, it looks like they're telling her like she's not allowed to choose a school. Maybe he just has to go from wherever he's at to wherever they're telling her he has to go. That's
Mhm.
from what I'm understanding from the question. But yes, you guys, all of the websites that Julie mentioned, I am going to have down in the description below. So just make sure that you check those things out. Give Julie a follow on Instagram and feel free to reach out to her. But remember, she's not in PA. For those that are listening in PA, some of you are in Canada, different countries. So definitely educate yourself with your country, your state, so you have the knowledge and remember the importance of it. But thank you again, Julie, for being here and for your yes. I appreciate it, taking out of your time. I know you're very busy. um so thank you so much. And you guys, this is the last episode of season 2. I will see you guys again for season 3, which will be in about a month or two. We will be back. We'll stay in touch on Instagram. So thank you guys again for a wonderful season and for all the guest speakers that joined me this season. Thank you. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Uniquely Wired Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing this space with me. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time.